Hello and welcome back to the channel. So today we're in my grow room, and the grow room is a room I've specially constructed for starting off seedlings in the early part of the year. You'll probably see me doing that in January and February. It's got insulated panels and reflective materials on the walls and ceiling. It's got a table filled with sand and a heat belt running through it that gives the seedling trays about 30 degrees temperature and gets them off to probably 20 degrees and gets them off to a flying start before I can transfer them out to the polytunnel later on in late February and March. So anyway, we'll deal with all of that later, but what we're here for today is I use it when I'm not using it for growing stuff. I use it for fermenting. And as I was saying before, I do beer and other things, and it has a nice consistent temperature. It doesn't fluctuate too much. So whether you want to keep it a little bit cooler or you want to keep stuff a little bit warmer, it works perfect. So I have my apple juice that I pressed yesterday in here, and I have about 170 liters of it going on. I had a little bit extra which I've frozen in washed out milk cartons, which I'll use as fresh apple juice just for breakfast and what later on. But so I have a problem, I have a dilemma. Normally with wine making and cider making, you would add sulphite to the must. So basically, if we look in here, what we've got is we have about 50 liters of apple juice, which is just sitting there right now. It's doing nothing. But what you want to turn that apple juice into cider is some yeast activity. Now, my normal way that I operate is I would add sulphite to it now, which kills all the unwanted microbes and bacteria inside there and gives the yeast a really fighting chance to start off. And then I would inoculate some commercial yeast, commercial cider yeast, and pop that in there, and I'd make a yeast starter, pop it in there, and within kind of 24 hours, 48 hours, you'd have quite a vigorous ferment. I'd ferment that away until dryness, and I'd have a cider. And it's quite good, in my opinion. And usually then, once it's fermented out and the cider is dry, I put it in an oak barrel to let it age for 6 months or up to a year, and then bottle it because I need the barrel to put next year's cider in. So that's the basic plan. But this year I want to do something called keeved cider. So keeved cider is where you will allow it to ferment, and from what I've been reading, most people allow it to ferment without sulphites. So, and then you don't add a commercial yeast. So you just allow the wild yeast that already exists in the juice. There's most things like grapes and apples on the skins have a lot of wild yeast. So what we've got here is the raw apple juice, nothing done to it, no sterilization, no pasteurization, no sulfites added. And frankly, it's quite scary. I've never done it before, and I'm really afraid that it's going to spoil. The reason winemakers do it is for that it doesn't spoil. It's a security. You use a specialized yeast which has been removed from the actual grapes that you're going to use. It's cultivated in a laboratory, and you get it in a dried form and add it back to the grape must, and it ferments away. Similarly with cider. So this year I'm not going to do that. So what's supposed to happen is I should leave this and let it ferment away at really cold temperatures. So what happens is, after about 3 days to 2 weeks, what should happen is it will start to ferment a little bit, and what you get on the top is kind of a brown, crusty material, which is all of the solids rising up in the vat, and that forms what the French call a cap brun or chapeau brun. which forms on the top of it. Now, in that is contained all of the nutrients and nitrogen and everything that the yeast needs to work really well, and feeds the yeast and causes it to ferment the dryness. So what happens normally is that will rise up and then will fall back down into the brew, and the yeast will feed off that. And after normally about 4 weeks or so, you can rack it off into a clean vessel, leaving a thick layer of sludgy sediment called the lees behind at the bottom. And then with possibly another 1 or 2 rackings, you'll have a crystal clear still cider. Perfectly fine to drink just like that. Then what I usually do after aging in an oak barrel is bottle it with a little bit of sugar, and the sugar causes a bottle conditioning, a fermentation in the bottle, which will give it a gas and make it kind of bubbly and pleasant to drink on a summer's day. Very pleasant. So what I'm going to do here today, what the plan is just to leave this without any of that and let it keeve. So let the chapeau brun rise up, and using this spigot here, open that, run off the juice, leaving the chapeau behind, and then you're depriving the must of all of the nutrients and what's called yan, which is the yeast available nitrogen that's contained in the lees that are left behind. Which means the resulting cider will be less alcoholic, somewhere around 2.8 to 3.5 degrees, as opposed to percent, as opposed to possibly 5 or 6, which I would normally achieve. That's a good thing or a bad thing, depending on how much you want the alcohol. But what you do gain is flavor, structure, complexity of flavor from the apples, and a residual sweetness that is left, because all of the sugars haven't fermented out. So you're left with a sweeter, more flavorsome cider. And I've tasted Keeve ciders, and they're fantastic. So I want to achieve that this year, but my fear is that the whole lot will spoil, because I'm going against all the knowledge I have and all of the practices I've employed over the years in brewing. So we'll see how it goes. It's going to sit here now for the next few days, and we'll check back in many times over the next couple of weeks, and hopefully we'll get that cap on the top. Otherwise, we're going to have a lot of apple cider vinegar. So maybe I might sulphite one of these small guys here, one of these ones, just as to salvage something in case it all goes wrong, and it'll make a good comparison anyway. Let's see how it goes. Anyway, thanks for watching the channel again. Please remember to subscribe, like, and share would be nice. Thank you, and we'll talk to you again.